Welcome to the Target Report, interview number 4. Mark, the title of the latest Target Report was Donuts Lead the Way in Return to Normalcy. What in the world does that mean?
In June, three things stood out. First, buyers are back in the market. That's the main trend that I want to emphasize today. Buyers are back in the market. They're calling us, they're announcing transactions, they're doing deals. There's always a mix of transactions, and some months it's one segment or the other, but what really stood out in June was that acquirers of packaging businesses are continuing to do deals. And the third was, of the four packaging segment companies that we found, all four of them touch the food business in one way or another. And if you think about it, as we're all staying home we're still consuming, and everything that we consume has to be labeled, boxed, bagged, pouched, wrapped, all these different packaging things, and everything that's baked, processed, canned, dried, frozen, all the food, drinks, cannabis where it's legal, all this stuff has to be packaged. And one of the transactions, Southern Tray, particularly focuses on bakery products, cake boards, boxes, French fry trays, donut boxes. So that was the, circling back to your question, Rod, that was the genesis of the title, in that donuts are leading the way in the return to normalcy.
Well, can you give us some examples? And were the buyers private, family-owned companies, or were these private equity firms?
Well, out of the four we found, two were private, family-owned companies, and two were private equity-backed platform companies that are continuing a roll-up strategy. The first one, as I mentioned, was Southern Tray. Southern Tray, headquartered in Tennessee, acquired Honeymoon products in Ohio. And Honeymoon particularly makes cake boards. And you might say, well, what's a cake board? If you could think about when you go to the bakery, let's say in the grocery store, and there's a tray, it's usually die-cut, scalloped edges, and maybe it's stamped or printed, usually decorated, but reasonably simply. And there may be a plastic lamination to protect the food from the ink. That's a cake board. So that would be one. Another one would be Welch Packaging, which we've written about before. That's a company that's laser focused on acquiring corrugated carton companies. And Scott Welch, who owns the company, has just executed one transaction after another, acquiring family-owned corrugated carton, corrugated display companies. So they now have factories or distributors as well throughout the Midwest, simply in the corrugated products. So those are the two family-owned companies. In the private equity-backed companies, one of them was Brook and Whittle in Connecticut, acquired Label Impressions in California. So not only is this another bolt-on to their platform company, it's a leap to the West Coast as well. And Brook and Whittle, Connecticut-based, is backed by Snow Phipps Group, which is their second private equity backer. So they're what's called a secondary buyout in the private equity.
Yeah, so you included a COVID-19 update in each of the latest Target reports. So what's your latest opinion of the market under the current stress of the coronavirus?
What we saw in June is a thaw in the marketplace that pretty much froze up late March and mostly through April. So May was a little better, and June was reasonably active, not the same as pre-COVID-19, but good activity. There were two transactions by larger companies. Sun Chemical bought Sensient Technologies, which makes digital ink. So Sun Chemical is clearly voting with their wallet that digital printing is going to continue to grow. And Baldwin Technologies, which a lot of printers know for the light systems in the delivery, and back in the day, the powder spray systems, Baldwin Technologies bought a company that makes UV lamps for drying systems. So they're voting also with their wallet that they're expecting UV printing technologies to increase and continue. So now what's interesting about those two transactions is those are larger companies. I would suspect that those transactions, because they take a longer time sometimes in larger companies, were probably in the works before the outbreak of the virus. Maybe got put on hold a little bit. And I'm sure there was some due diligence as to what the impact of COVID-19 has been on the companies. But again, they're executing on a strategy that makes sense for them over the long term. In terms of bankruptcies, which you might expect, we have not seen an uptick in bankruptcies. I'm going to say yet. We hope not, but it seems to be there's going to be a lot of challenges in the printing industry. But they're not filing bankruptcy. We are seeing an uptick in non-bankruptcy plant closures. And a couple examples of that would be TC Continental in Canada, which is Canada's largest printer. These two plants they closed were newspaper printing plants that the publisher of the newspapers announced that they were no longer going to publish a daily newspaper. So Transcontinental decided to close those two printing plants. So that's an impact from the COVID-19. And Arundel, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, it might be Arundel or Arundel, closed their Kentucky plant, which they opened a couple of years ago as part of their expansion strategy. And that's a web printing plant that had been owned by, I believe, Trend Offset, and also Continental Web owned that plant at one time or another. Arundel has closed that and retreated back to their Wisconsin plant, which is their much more significant printing facility in Wisconsin. So in summary, I don't mean to be all gloom and doom, because we can see from the transactions in June that there's a lot of activity. The activity is primarily driven by healthy companies executing on strategic plans that were probably in place before the virus outbreak. And we're not seeing a tremendous amount of closures, and we're not seeing bankruptcies. So things are moving along, and buyers are coming back into the marketplace.
Good news, Mark. Thank you so much. Always enjoy our interviews. Look forward to next month's.
Thank you, Rod.